my PMP. Yeah. Hello, this is William here. This video primarily is about how I took the Project Management Professional exam from PMI Project Management Institute, and I passed the exam above target on all domains. And this is about the lessons learned, basically how I prepared for the exam and how I was able to go through the process of taking the exam and how I was able to arrive at that score. So my experience is the lesson learned, so you can benefit from basically benefit from the exam. So primarily I prepared for my PMP, I would say actively for 4 weeks, but overall for about 8 weeks, but more actively for 4 weeks. So 4 weeks I had a reduced work schedule, and so almost 5 days out of the 7 days a week I was giving in between 3 to 5 hours, thereabouts. About 3 to 5 hours, basically answering questions, just going about the processes of the PMP. Though it is recommended that you put in at least 100 hours of study when studying for your PMP. However, I think I must have put in between 150 to 200 hours. Yeah, thereabout. And part of the reason I did that was number one, I felt maybe I didn't have that much experience in quotes. You know, when you get to do something every day, day in and day out, and it kind of sticks with you because you have that experiential knowledge compared to when you don't really do it day in and day out, or probably it's been a while you did it, and you may not have that experiential knowledge to be able to apply to the scenario of the exam questions. And also, I'd heard stories about people that took the exam up to 3 times, and I didn't want to take the exam 3 times. So I wanted to just take it once and knock it off the way, and that's how it was. Thank God it worked out for me. Yeah, so I must have put in between 150 to 200 hours thereabouts. But primarily lessons learned in taking the exam. I would say lots of agile questions, lots of agile questions. So when you study the exam content outline, and by the way, you know it has just been reviewed by Project Management Institute. So the PMP has just been reviewed by Project Management Institute. They've introduced Agile, and they've made it more, so the scenario-based questions, or the questions they ask now, they've made it more realistic, more relational to the modern business day environment. So modern day business environment rather. So they've made it more relatable to the modern day business environment. So a lot of the questions have been altered or transformed, and in my opinion, I think it's easier compared to just assessing people based on some abstract things that are not really applicable in the modern day business environment. So thumbs up to PMI on that. So yeah, so they've introduced Agile, and I believe you already know what Agile is. Agile, the iterative, kind of progressive approach towards the software development lifecycle, project management lifecycle. Yes, basically the approach towards business development. So we have the predictive traditional waterfall, then we have the agile-based agile-based kind of approach, progressive kind of approach. So you build in iterations, and there are various versions of it. You have Scrum, Kanban, Lean, even measures like Scrumban, hybrid versions. So that's Agile primarily, and you have to know Agile. Like it's not something that you can just walk over. You definitely have to know Agile. So I would recommend that if you don't already know Agile, you can take a crash course in Agile, And because for me, part of what gave me the advantage is I actually already had an Agile certification about a year before I took the PMP. So I was already introduced to Agile. I already knew Agile to a good extent. So while studying for the PMP, I just had to brush up my knowledge of Agile and ensure that what I knew about Agile were really the right things. And also according to the PMI standard, so PMI is the Project Management Institute. I believe you already know that, the body responsible for setting the PMP exam. So according to PMI standards, I had to know Agile based on what they were talking about. So primarily the versions of Agile they covered were Lean, Extreme Programming, they covered Scrum for sure, and also Kanban. Yeah, so they covered that. Then some other measures between them, and also hybrid. So when you're merging things like traditional waterfall and Agile together, that kind of approach in the business environment, they covered all that. So there were lots of Agile questions. More than, though PMI, they will say it's 50% Agile, but I believe it's more than 50%. It should be at least 60 to 70% Agile with the questions that I saw during the exam. And there were no calculations whatsoever in the exam. Surprising, right? There were no calculations, just interpretation of the SPI and the CPI, so the Schedule Performance Index and the Cost Performance Index. So basically they'll give a question and say how the figure of the SPI or the CPI basically interprets what is going on in that scenario. And so you pick from the option. And basically there were about 3 questions in that area. So basically those were the nearest type of calculation questions that I found during my exam. And also there were about 2 EV questions, and basically that's what it was. And I mean, you already know the kind of questions that come out, so they are not just multiple choice. You also have things like hotspots questions, where you click on a particular area to choose the answer that is right for that question. You have drag and drop. So there were drag and drop questions also, and I think they were up to 7 drag and drop questions, and the drag and drop questions were really tricky to a good extent. I think they were tricky, and but pretty much the questions were kind of straightforward. They were more of like 2-sentence questions to a good extent. They were not so wordy, and so they were pretty straightforward. I'm talking about the majority of them. So no calculation questions, and good number of tricky questions, tricky options. And so you have to really have that agile mindset, have that project manager mindset, and basically have that experience as a project manager to be able to know what you're talking about and which is the right answer to this particular question, because a lot of the time they were so close to call, they were too close to call. And I would say always have an answer for an unsure question. Always have an answer for an unsure question even before marking it for review. So that means when taking the exam, you have the option of you marking a question for review, so you can with the highlighting pen and all that, you can strike through some options that are not, that you think, basically using an elimination method, strike through options that you think are not the right options, a right answer to that question. Then you when you've narrowed it down, then you can now mark it for review if you still have not concluded which is the right option for that question. So you mark it for review and you progress to other questions. So, but in my opinion, I always put the best possible answer there. So my best guess for that question, I've always marked it and I put it there, I already clicked it. And even if I still marked it for review, so in the case whereby I didn't have enough time to review the questions, then it wouldn't be as if I shot myself in the leg. I would still know that I put in something there that was my best guess at that time. And secondly, I think it saves time. So if you don't mark a question, if you just mark a question for review without leaving an answer there, when you come back to it, it's as if you are reading it afresh again. Because a challenging question like that, you must have spent probably up to 50 seconds, 40, 50 seconds trying to figure out what they're talking about, and it's still not clicking. Then you leave it, you progress to other questions, then you come back to it again, and as if you're starting afresh, you have to put in another 50 seconds or thereabout to figure out what you're talking about. But if you had marked an answer, then you start from where you left off when you come back to that question. And so you know that, okay, this question, this is the reason I put this answer there, and this is what they're talking about. So it's easier for you to arrive at a conclusion because the clock is ticking and you need to maximize the time well. So basically, always have an answer for a particular question before moving on, even when you mark it for review. And primarily, I would say obey the exam rules. So in my exam, I took it from home because PMI has that option now. You can take it from home, but it's proctored. That means you have an invigilator watching you, so an exam proctor watching you through your webcam and through the camera of your computer, and they enforce the rules. So while you are taking the exam actively, except during the break time, you're not supposed to leave the camera frame. You can't go out of the camera lens, so you have to be within the camera lens. You can't do things like that. And to a good extent, they always have to see your hands, and you can't mumble. You can't say things under your breath. You can't read the questions under your breath even. Yeah, that's strict. So you can't read the questions under your breath to yourself or mumble the questions or something. So basically, when taking the exam from home, those are the options. So there's the option of taking it at the testing center, or you take it from home. Yeah, so I took it from home, and primarily I had to obey the exam rules. And you know you already have two breaks, 10 minutes breaks. So PMI, the questions now are 180 questions, and you have 230 minutes to tackle 180 questions. So there are two breaks, 10 minutes break at the 60th question and also at the 120th question. So at question 60, question 120, you have 10 minutes break. But the breaks are not compulsory, in quote. You can decide to not take the break and just continue, and that break time adds to your time of the exam. However, I strongly advise you take the break because 230 minutes and you're sitting down straight because the thing is, the exam is draining. So it's mentally draining and physically draining. So you don't want to put yourself under that kind of condition, because if you just continue to say, oh, I'm not hired, I tell you what, when you get to question 100, you're going to really feel it, the diminishing returns, and it's going to affect your performance. So you really want to take your break. You really want to use your break, your 10 minutes break. And so basically, before the break, if you had marked questions, it will ask you to review the questions that you marked before the break, because once you come back from the break, you cannot go back to those questions anymore. You'll never see those questions anymore. You only see questions that are coming after. You never see the ones before the break. So you only review those questions that you've marked before the break. So moving on, pace yourself. And part of the reasons I said I must have put in 150 to 200 hours is that I took about 4 practice questions, simulation questions. So that means they were trying to mimic the actual exam conditions. So 230 minutes, 180 questions. I signed up for platforms that I had to take simulation questions. So I took about 4 simulation questions, and that really helped me a lot in preparing for the exam. So that also helped me to a good extent to pace myself well, and when taking the actual exam, I was able to assess how I was doing based on the clock. So I know, okay, at this clock, at this time, this is the number of questions I must have answered, or this is where I should be at. And that really helped me to be able to pace myself a lot. And at the end of the day, even if I had some interruptions, which I'll talk about soon, I still had about 50 seconds free. After answering all the questions, I had about 50 seconds free. And yeah, it was great. So pace yourself well, take a lot of practice questions, and practice simulation tests, practice exams to be able to pace yourself well. Don't continuously allow the proctor interruptions to act against you, to affect you. Let them know your plight, and they should be responsible for the problems that originate from their end. So that means, as I said earlier on, I took my exam proctor from home, and while I was taking my exam, up to 3 times, the proctor told me to reset the platform because they couldn't see my video feed anymore. So, but I didn't know that while that was going on, because they can chat with you, they can even, there's the option of them speaking to you through the speaker of the system. So they can speak to you directly like it's a call or maybe a Zoom call or something, and they can also chat with you. So, but while that was going on, my time was counting and I didn't factor that in. So there was even a time I resetted the system, and it took me about 4 minutes before I was able to get back on the platform, because they put me on a queue to get back on the platform after resetting the exam platform. And that really took a lot of my time. So I lost about 10 minutes thereabout, and so when I checked my pace and I saw how I was going, I knew I couldn't afford to continue those interactions with the proctor. So I just chatted with them and told them, okay, I need to focus on the exam. I can see myself, but if you cannot see me, I cannot do anything about that, sorry. And I just had to focus on the exam. So don't allow, if you're taking the exam from home, and they have unstable internet on their own end, don't allow that to affect you. So, and that's that about that. And the next one is ensure that you take your breaks, maximize them well. Maximize the breaks you take well. Ensure you take your breaks and use the restroom when you take your breaks, and review your jottings, your mind maps, and eat a snack. Yeah, eat a snack, hydrate well. Yeah, drink something, stretch well. Stretch is very, very important because you are sitting down. So you need to stretch, move around, and even watch a funny video, watch a funny clip. That's what I did while I was eating a snack. I was watching a funny clip, and basically that helps to recalibrate the mind. It helps to refresh the mind, and it helps to make you ready for the next session. So do is a 10 minutes break, ensure you maximize it well. And another thing is the break is 10 minutes. If you don't get back to your chair before that 10 minutes expires, your time will just keep counting. It just keeps going, and the exam, your 10 minutes counts down and the exam continues. So it's to your own benefit that you get, but you maximize your break well, and you come back to your chair just before the break expires. So I would say the next thing there is ensure that you're mentally and physically prepared before the exam. Rest well, properly refresh before the exam. That is very essential, because it's something that is draining. 230 minutes, and you are going through questions, and you're trying to brainstorm which is the right answer and all that. So it's mentally draining. You need to be physically ready for it, and that's part of the reason why I took those practice simulation exams, about 4 of them, to make me ready for it. And rest well. And funny enough, you know what? I took my exam very early in the morning. When I mean early in the morning, I took my exam by 3:45 a.m. that's when I scheduled my exam to start. Yeah, so it was on a weekend, and by 3:45 a.m. and my friend said, you are one unique person. It's kind of weird. I don't know anybody that takes an exam that early in the morning, like 3:45 a.m. But the reason I did that though was I know myself. I'm my best at night. When I mean night, like early hours of the day, very early in the morning, before dawn. That's when I really creative. That's when I really am able to accomplish a lot of things. I'm so productive at that time, and that's why I scheduled the exam for that particular time, and it worked out for me. So know what works out for you. I'm not advising you to schedule your exam by 3:45 a.m. if that doesn't work out for you. So know what works out for you, but you want to maximize it in a way that you are able to avoid distractions. You are able to use the time effectively, because if you are taking your exam from home, it's just like you're taking it in an exam hall. They don't tolerate the exam rules. So when you study the exam content outline and you check out what the exam rules are, you see that they don't tolerate interruptions. So they cannot be hearing some funny sounds in the background. Other people cannot be speaking in the background. Nobody can come into the exam frame or things like that, the camera frame. So they would disqualify you. So you want to pick a time that is most suitable for you. Basically, that's what that is. And don't panic if it seems rough initially. You'll get a hold of it, and don't allow that to affect your confidence. So initially, it may seem rough. I remember initially, when I got to question 60, I wasn't going at a pace that I had planned. So I was like, oh wow, I'm taking too much time in answering the question. So as at question 60 came the time for my break, and I wasn't going at that pace. I checked the time. I was like, okay, this is not good. So I knew that okay, I had to pick up the pace during the second phase of it, and basically that's what I did. So the initial questions may seem like, oh, they are kind of abstract, or maybe they want to throw you off balance. Don't bother about it. Don't worry about it, and ensure that your confidence is up there. And PMI doesn't want you to answer all the questions. They don't want you to get 90% or 99%. And so I believe maybe the percentage is about 75, between 70 and 75% score on all the domains. So I think you already know that, but if you don't know, you can actually answer more questions yet still fail the PMP exam, because they test based on the domain. So there's a percentage you must get based on the domain of the various domains of the domains of the exam. So whether it's people and process or business environment, there's a passing percentage which you must clinch to be able to pass the whole exam. And another thing I also had is basically you don't want to mark too many questions for review. So if you have 60 questions per session and you have 3 sessions, so I don't think you should mark more than 15 questions if you have 60 questions per session, because if you mark too many questions for review, that's going to take a lot of your time when you're reviewing it. And it will be as if, okay, did you really prepare for it? At least you should have an idea of what they are talking about. So you don't really want to mark too many questions for review. I would say it's safe if you mark about 10 questions, but if it's too much, about 15 questions maximum should be what you should mark for review for every 60 question section. Basically, that's it. And extras to what I learned and how to prepare for the exam. I would say don't overhydrate, and don't eat something that will make you want to use the restroom before the next break. So like in my case, I actually overhydrated, and before I got to the 60th question, I felt the pressure on my bladder already, and I wanted to urinate basically. So as at question 50, I was already kind of feeling pressed. So, but don't overhydrate. You know the way your body works. So take what is allowable for you and what your body can process. Don't eat anything that would mess up your system make you want to frequently use the restroom, because you cannot leave until it's your break time. So know that. Keep the time of the day. Know the time of the day that's suitable for you. I already talked about that, and know what works for you. Be early to the exam. Log in before the time. So if you're taking the exam from home, when it is scheduled, you will get the email about what you're supposed to do before the exam day. Yeah, you're supposed to download the software, which is Pearson VUE. Yeah, Pearson VUE software, and basically they make you run through a system check, and they test your internet and test your webcam, test your microphone and all that, and also ensure that your system is able to handle the exam software and things like that. Yeah, so but on the exam day, it is advised that you log in at least 30 minutes before the exam, because they would make you answer some test questions, about maybe 3 to 5 kind of questions that don't count towards the exam. Then also you have to basically give them a report of your surroundings. Yeah, so they'll make you, after you do your ID verification, they'll make you take a picture of your surroundings just like this. So take a picture facing this angle, picture facing this angle, a picture facing this angle, so things like that, and you upload it to them. Then before they open the exam platform and you start taking the exam. So that takes about 15 minutes at least to do that. So you want to actually log into the exam platform on time. So log in like 30 minutes, at least 15 minutes before the exam time, and so you're able to clear that off the road and it doesn't affect your exam. And that basically that's it, and that's basically what it takes. So primarily what I studied, the materials I used what you call them. So I used Joseph Phillips Udemy course. I used Joseph Phillips. I used Andrew Yamdayel Udemy course, and yeah, I used Andrew Yamdayel's Udemy course. Then I also used exam prep. Yeah, so PMP prep. I think that's what they call them. Yes, it should be PMP prep. That's basically what I use for the practice questions. So I used yeah, so Prepcast. Yeah, that's the name. I use Prepcast. I use Prepcast for the exam test and simulation questions. Now, Prepcast is very good. Actually, the simulation questions, simulation tests and exams that I did on Prepcast were harder than what I saw on PMP. Yeah, so it's better to prepare for something harder and get something easier on the real exam than to prepare for something easier and get something harder in the real exam. So I use Prepcast. I use Andrew Yamdayel's Udemy course. I use Joseph Phillips Udemy course. Then I actually signed up for the PMI membership, so I was privileged to get the soft copy of the PM book, the latest PM book. Then other things like the Agile Practice Guide and the exam content outline. So primarily, that's what I did in my exam, and that's how I tackled my exam, and that's how I was successful. So I would say prepare and do all that's necessary and get your confidence up there. Give it your best shot. I know you're going to be successful at the end of the day, and you are called out for this. So at the end of the day, I would like to hear about your success stories. I would like to hear about your experiences in taking the PMP. You can leave that in the comment section, and see you at the top. Bye.